Well, let's get started. Welcome everyone in person and on Zoom. I'm Christine Bowman, Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs here in the college. And this is an event in a collaboration, a serious collaboration this year between Create for STEM Institute and my office. Generative AI, especially stories about ChatGPT, have really consumed a lot of airspace and a lot of our attention over the past year. And so we wanted to have some sustained conversations about these things, particularly highlighting expertise from within our college and also expertise from folks that are part of the great Create for STEM network and extended family. So we really appreciate the collaboration and co-sponsorship with Create for STEM. And part of that is that we have some snacks at the back of the room today, and they are also filming this and making it available online, which is wonderful. So I want to very briefly introduce you to Dr. Josh Plavnik. He is a professor of special education, director of the Early Learning Institute, and he will be our presenter today. And I have to tell you, I'm a little nervous because I got an email from Josh this morning saying, would you be willing to let me use one of your papers as part of a demonstration today? And I said, sure. It had never occurred to me. And so I was telling Josh before he's the one doing all the things, right? I don't know why I should be nervous, but I think anytime we start to think about these things and the intersection with our own academic work and our creative processes, it unsettles some of our assumptions and comfort level. So I'm really excited to hear from Dr. Plavnik, and without further ado, I will turn it over to him. Actually, one further ado. I will keep an eye on the chat in case there are any questions that come up. And additionally, well, actually, that's it. I'll just keep an eye online in case you need anything anything from wherever you are in the world. And thanks for joining us online. Okay, Josh.
Thanks, Christine. And the introduction, in terms of the expert piece, I'll preface my presentation by clearly saying I am not a researcher in AI. I haven't done studies in it at this point. I'm an avid user. I really enjoy new technologies. I like seeing how they allow us to do different things with our own work, especially in regards to teaching. And as I first learned about, when ChatGPT came out last year to the public, and I started messing around with it at the beginning of 23, I think it was. I started just going down this rabbit hole of different things that could be done and looking for more and trying to understand new ways of using the technology in our approach to teaching. Also, as Christine mentioned, I'm the director of the Early Learning Institute, which is an early intervention center for children with autism. At any given time, we have 40 behavior technicians, all of whom are generally, for the most part, they're younger, either in college or have just gotten a bachelor's degree and are working one-on-one to provide therapeutic services to young children with autism. And so we are constantly battling this training challenge of how do you prepare people for this job as quick as possible to do as good a job as possible and get them information that you want them to have. And also, how do you answer all of the questions that they have, which are quite numerous. And it's difficult. It's a lot of human-intensive labor to be able to do it. And so, from the beginning, that's kind of been my outlook on this: is how might this work if we started to use it to train early career service providers, which I think relates quite well to how we might train teachers or use it for teaching teachers and educators. And as I'll get into today, how we might use generative AI especially with our graduate students. And I think we have a huge responsibility to start using the technology ourselves and understand how it might work and how we might teach our graduate students about the technology and to use it. And to start, I'll just, let's see here. Actually, before I get too far, while I have the pictures of Zoom up, just a quick show of hands, how many people have used just the free generic ChatGPT that you can get online? And Zoom folks can weigh in as well, that would be helpful.
2 minutes ago.
2 minutes ago? Awesome, great, okay. And how many have used GPT-4, which is the AI, it's the plus version that you pay $20 a month for to use? Okay. How many have used the plugins with ChatGPT Plus? Awesome. And how many of you have used other types of AI kind of large language models, maybe aside from ChatGPT? A little bit. Okay, all right. And several online. Perfect. So everyone's going to be at a slightly different spot. Some of you, this is going to be repetitive for. Others, hopefully it's helpful. I'll go through kind of what I learned as I went down my own little rabbit hole of how we might use it, and then we'll finish by trying to teach GPT to be a tutor with a special article. Let me see if I can move everything now, mostly. And I will ask, so this is designed to be interactive, so if you have questions or ideas, I think it would be really helpful. One thing I'm learning quickly is that the more I learn about what you can do, first, it changes fast because there's new technology every single week. And second, the idea generation part is one of the harder parts for all of this and one of the bigger challenges. So having multiple people be able to participate in that is helpful. Okay, so why is this important and why might it be important for our students? First thing, earlier this year, in my field, somebody had published an article, a peer-reviewed article, that defended private equity involvement in autism services. And then in the fall of this year, that article got retracted. It was a sole author publication in a strange journal. It was in Electronic Journal of Elementary Education. The woman ended up retracting it because there was use of artificial intelligence that led to numerous inaccuracies within the reference and body of the paper. Basically, ChatGPT made up a bunch of citations. She sticks them in the end of her paper, gets it published in an obscure journal, and has to retract it later. The woman who did it, she had a master's degree. She's a board-certified behavior analyst. She happens to be was the CEO of Behavioral Health Centers of Excellence. Behavioral Health Centers of Excellence basically certifies autism intervention centers across the country. So they're putting a stamp of approval of this is a positive entity and providing some kind of consumer reassurance that where they're sending their child for autism treatment is a valid entity. Meanwhile, the CEO of that company is publishing content that is pulled from ChatGPT or that is somewhat kind of unethical in terms of how the material was put together and published. And I mention this not because I don't know if the article was flawed in any way beyond that, but I mention it because these are folks who are essentially, they come here. We have a lot of master's students in applied behavior analysis. Obviously, the college has master's students in a number of fields. As they go out and explore their careers, it's important they know what the software can do, what it's good at, what it's not good at, and what we shouldn't even try and do with it, and where we have to be really careful. ChatGPT is terrible at writing. It really produces relatively poor content. And I remember when we had conversations last spring about what happens if students use it from a plagiarism perspective. My general take was, first of all, most students who use the free version are going to get a poor grade because it's not good content, and you're going to recognize that. You don't have to worry about plagiarism as much because the content itself will be poorly written. It's getting better, though, at writing that content, so that's gonna be a real thing. And it's important that students learn how they might use generative AI in their own work. And obviously, what would be extremely problematic. And this wasn't a former MSU student. Ideally, we would keep the former MSU students out of these situations because they used the language models in their own work. So that's a little bit about, kind of behind the why. I've started, as I mentioned, since last year, using ChatGPT in a number of formats and trying to understand it better. So I'll go through some things to kind of provide some clarifications of what we've done. My vision, my goal is to have basically a chatbot that could go live in, say, my D2L course. But what I'd really like to be able to do is train the chatbot on my content, not on whatever ChatGPT or OpenAI has trained it on. I want to give it my old videos from my classes. I want to give it any papers I've written. I want to give it papers that I feel like are applicable to what we're doing, and let students use the chatbot and interact with the chatbot in a way that they can learn. And so that's what I that's like the end goal, the big idea. I think would be pretty incredible if we had that. And so this semester I've been exploring how might we do that without that technology directly embedded into our D2L. And if you happen to know how to do these things, come talk to me, because I'm very interested in seeing how it might work. So we start with just a simple ChatGPT interface. And I'm going to go through some of the tools that I've used and some of the things that I like for it. And I will send you, Christine, a page of links so that then you can distribute that for anything you use.
Thank you.
So some tools to use with ChatGPT and how you might want to put it together. The first is ChatGPT 4, that's the version you pay for, has a number of, it came out with several exciting plugins earlier this fall. Plugins are essentially, it's the same thing that you use on your web browser, where you just add kind of Google extensions, basically, that do new things, that provide new mechanisms that you can use. One of the first that I messed around with and played with was this Video Insights upgrade. So actually, let me start from the beginning. When you go to a new ChatGPT, if you go to a new page, you'll have a choice. If you have ChatGPT 4, you can use it. Otherwise, you're using 3.5. You can ask it to use your plugins. On the plugin page, if you don't have any selected, you'll have a chance to go to the plugin store. The plugin store is much like an Apple app store. You can just click on it and you can start to explore plugins. There will be several suggestions that are popular or are interesting to use. In this case, I happen to have already hooked up with one called videoinsights.io. So Video Insights will look at a video on YouTube, and basically what it's doing is it's automatically pulling the transcript and rewriting it so that it can answer questions about what's in the content. So one of the first things I just looked at doing is, can we train it on a video? Can we feed a video to ChatGPT? Will it understand it? What can it tell us about the video? Let's see if I can zoom in. So this happened to be a video. It was a presentation by B.F. Skinner on talking about content from his book Verbal Behavior, which just happened to be the class I'm teaching this semester, so that's why I pulled that one. And it had no problem really pulling content from the video, telling me about the primary components in the video, and then I was able to ask questions. Great, that's easy. But then I thought, and again, here I wasn't trying to necessarily pull this video. I was thinking if I had a video of myself, say I had an old course, or I have video from a hybrid course or something of that sort, could I start to create content for students from the video? Absolutely. So we can ask ChatGPT to build lecture notes from a video, and it'll pull it from the transcript and make its own video. You have to read these because it's the first thing you get is not always going to be the best. It's not always going to be exactly what you want. But by selecting just the video, you can essentially tell the AI, don't use anything else. Don't scroll the web to look for new information. Don't rely on other things you were trained on. Just take it from this video transcript, which is sort of what we want when we think about moving into something that can be useful for our students, is can we control what gets selected. It's essentially, to me, like making a syllabus at the beginning of a semester. You pick all of your articles and you train this bot on your particular articles. So it puts out content from the video, which is great. That's very helpful. And then I went into other videos, asked similar questions. You would need to review it and make sure it's accurate. I mean, that's going to be the number one thing always, is retraining the bot for accuracy. The good news is with ChatGPT 4, you can now revise what it does. You can tell it through your prompts to ignore certain things or only focus on what you're doing. The real key here is it's really a two-step prompt process, and I'll show that in a minute with other materials and other apps, where you want a back-end prompt. So this is something that gets programmed into whatever large language model you're using that tells it, only answer the questions that you have content on. Don't answer other questions. If you don't know the answer, just tell me you don't know. Otherwise, it will give you an answer that isn't right. That's what, if you read about hallucinations, that's essentially what they are, is that all GPTs want to do is answer your question. Well, like a large language model, it just wants to answer your question. That's the end game. So it'll answer your question no matter what, and I'll show you some instances of completely inaccurate, wrong lies, basically. So you have to have a mechanism that says, tell me, only use the information I give you to produce a response. I see a couple items in the chat. If anyone has questions, just stop me.
So I'll add from the chat, Chris Shaltry mentioned that his team has experimented with this. I think you were talking about the bot and feeding it content. And he says it's remarkable. The issue was that use of our custom GPTs requires users to have a GPT Plus account with the monthly subscription.
Yeah.
And he's happy to share information and talk and put his email in the chat. So
that's
thanks,
awesome,
Chris.
thank you. Yeah, and we're gonna build right into that because custom GPTs are coming. So those are the extensions, and there's numerous extensions that you can use. There's math problem solver extensions. There's PDF readers. That's changed a lot now that you can write your own GPTs, but those kind of came early on and were something you could set up. Really quick, before we get into custom make your own GPTs, one other tool I just want to show, because as we think about using this in your classrooms or with students, one of the mechanisms that we used it for, we started looking at something called a long prompt splitter. So ChatGPT you can only plug so much in as a prompt that it'll take and accept and use. There's only so many characters. I think it's 15,000 characters, which translate out to words and letters, and I don't know exactly how many that is. But what you can do with a long document or a long prompt is you can copy and paste the entire thing into the prompt splitter, which again, I'll leave links after. And then the prompt splitter will divide it out and embed the code telling ChatGPT to read a certain amount and then wait for more, read it, wait for more, read it. And then it'll have all of the content. And when it's completely done, you can basically say, tell me when you've read everything, and then let me know and I'll ask you questions. So we then messed around with that with a student's thesis, with a paper that a student wrote, because we wanted to ask GPT, okay, could you be an initial editor? So say I'm swamped and I want students to take their content to ChatGPT. Can it start to give them feedback about things that students sometimes struggle with in writing? So for us, APA formatting is a big one. Passive sentences come up. And other topics that maybe ChatGPT could serve as an editor, not a writer. So that's pretty important, obviously, to set up from the beginning. So just to show you what that ends up looking like in GPT, forgive me, I gotta find the right one. Ignore my requests for recipes.
Those look good too.
Yeah, why ignore that?
Well, they're not my favorite. So my family, everyone in my family besides me is a vegetarian. But I do like to do a lot of cooking. So I'm constantly looking for better recipes. It's not that one. Sorry, I pulled these up before, but now I'm... Aha. Nope.
I've never even thought of using GPT for recipes.
Oh, it's great. So what's crazy with the
Yeah.
plugins, what's really wild is you can download like the Expedia travel plugin and a food plugin, and you can tell ChatGPT, I'm going on a trip to Italy, can you find me a flight and then a hotel? I'd like to cook the first day and go out to dinner the second day, so can you get the groceries ordered and then also give me suggestions on where to go eat? And it'll give you a list of, it's a little crazy, yeah. Okay, so here is the prompt splitter in action. Everything got plugged in to the prompt splitter here. And it puts out 3 different kind of like cut and paste pieces. So you just say, all right, copy this and plug it into GPT. And the code, this is an automatic prompt that goes into GPT from the prompt splitter. It says, don't answer yet. This is just, a part of the text I want to send you. Tell me when you have all of it. So it absorbs the text and says, I have it, thank you, go ahead and put the next part in. So then I put in part 2, it reads part 2, tells me it has it, and then I say, okay, read part 3, and it reads part 3. So pretty basic, pretty simple. It now has the entire student paper. Great. So now we say, all right, can you tell us a little bit about the paper? And it summarizes it for us. Note that this is an unsubmitted, well, actually now it is submitted, but at the time it was an unsubmitted paper. So now we're going to give GPT a prompt. We're going to tell it, be a professor reviewing the study, help the student make critical changes so that the paper can be submitted to a peer-reviewed journal. We used none of this, the GPT content in publication. I'll make that really clear. We didn't use any of it. It was really designed to be a test, and I wouldn't recommend it. You'll see why. It's not the world's greatest assistant, but it can begin to give a bulleted list of things students might want to check for, say, APA formatting errors. And it does a pretty nice job of recommending specific items and catching clear issues. So headings are a good example. Text does not seem to follow APA headings. Ensure that the headings are properly formatted. This is vague, but if at the end of this I said, tell me about the problems with the headings, be very specific which headings are wrong and why, it will tell you exactly which ones are wrong and what needs to be fixed. So students can use it to begin to edit their own work, which is extremely helpful. I don't know how many students are here and how many faculty are here, but like that log jam is a real thing. When we're editing multiple papers, having something where students can get a quick edit of APA mistakes is really helpful. Then I asked it to generate a bulleted list of all grammatical errors, and it captured sentence fragments, punctuation, consistency and tense, subject-verb agreements, spelling and typos. These are things that we deal with all the time and we catch. If any of these, if you want all of the examples on any of these, you can say, give me specific examples and tell me which one to do for, say, subject-verb agreements that are missed throughout the paper. One thing I will say about all large language models in general that I'm finding is that they love the beginning and the end of any text you feed it. For some reason, they don't attend to the middle as well. So they'll have a bias in what they put back to you without really good training, and you almost have to force I feel like it's being lazy, and so you have to force it to read the entire paper. Just tell it, like, you're not reading carefully or you missed content in the middle. I asked for any issues with the logic and flow of the introduction and discussion sections. It didn't do a great job of that, but it provided some information. And then I asked for studies that might be missed and citations to studies. This is an extension called Scholar AI. Scholar AI as an extension is no longer completely useful because now there's a whole GPT for Scholar AI, which means that somebody basically programmed GPT to run it. So if you have access to GPT-4, you can just use that. Scholar AI is basically linked to open source papers. So all open source papers that have been published and are accessible, it can search through those to find information and provide that back to students or to us as we use it. So it identified some papers that may or may not actually fit. I didn't think it did a great job with this one, but it was interesting to see it search the web and find papers. It also provides sources to the papers, and it'll ask you at the end, would you like me to dive deeper into any of these studies, which is quite nice of it, or quite polite. And then I wanted to really push, so I asked for, give me a list of confusing sentences. And I was curious, like, could you put it into table format so that you give me a confusing sentence and a suggested revision? And it did, which is crazy. I'm not sure that I always liked the revisions that much, so, or I don't know that I always agreed that the sentences were confusing. But it was interesting that it could select those out from the paper as sentences it didn't get.
Did you have a sense that the meaning changed in a lot of those examples?
I thought the meaning was accurate. Yeah, relatively accurate. And here they are, for example. And in some cases, I thought the edits were actually better in terms of being more precise and clear. So that was kind of interesting. So that's prompt splitter, which is very, very useful for long pieces of text that we want to edit. There are other options and ways to do this where you can actually use a plugin that reviews a Google Drive. So if you want to put a doc into Google, you can review it that way. Or of course you can review PDFs. But I found that the prompt splitter generally gets a better conversation because you're building the context within this one GPT, and it seemed to work a little bit better. Have you tried a Google Doc?
Yes.
How did it work?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think adding the context to the chatbot is more is more efficient compared to either reading the PDF or read the Google Drive document. That's not work.
Yeah. So that's why I like the prompt splitter. Since I see it in the column, I'll just disclaimer: ChatGPT is horrible at picking fantasy football teams. Horrible. Just didn't work well. But these are all the things that I'm just literally. I think it's worth time spent to mess around with how it interacts with the different prompts you give it in different areas and doing different things. So pulling from it can pull from websites, but you get mixed outcomes. And this is where I'm starting to think there's a lot of things assignments we could be giving to students to actually find the flaws in ChatGPT. So I don't want to spend so much time worrying about are they using it to cheat or not, because number one, that's going to be impossible soon. And number two, I probably should adjust my assignments rather than try and check everything they turned in. It's probably time to change the way how I assign content to classes if I'm worried about it. But more importantly, I want them to know how to use it. Clearly, young professionals are going to use generative AI in their work. That ship has sailed. Our job, I feel like, is to teach them the best ways to get the most accurate content from it and to use it in an ethical manner. Okay. The next thing I do want to get into is recently ChatGPT or OpenAI put out a new update that allows us to make our own GPTs, which is getting closer and closer to where we want to go in terms of developing maybe a chatbot for students to use. Now, as mentioned in the Zoom chat, this is only available to people with GPT Plus, so the paid subscription. And the downside is I can make a GPT, and I did, called Behavior Insight, but it's only accessible to people who have the account, the paid-for account. So that's the downside. But there are a number of accounts that OpenAI has already developed, from data analytics to learning about games. So if you want to learn about a board game, it can explain it to you, which might be helpful. I haven't tried it yet, but I was trying to Google instructions for cribbage, and I'm like, well, I don't really care to read this, so I need something else. So I'm going to ask Game Time to teach my wife and I to play cribbage.
I can teach you how.
Hey, there we go. But can the AI? So it's just interesting in terms of what's out there. Again, here is the Scholar AI GPT. So this is basically just a GPT dedicated to producing content from Scholar AI, which will search the web for millions of different articles that may or may not be in your field. It's not really a useful tool for doing any kind of a comprehensive literature review because it misses a lot of databases, especially anything behind a paid firewall. But what was interesting about this, and the reason it's useful, and again, I would think, and I believe we have a mini grant, correct, where it could fund use of faculty and maybe a doc student working group on for the GPT Plus subscription. So if anyone has a small class next semester, I would consider applying for that if it's still open, because I think teaching students to make their own GPTs is where things can get particularly interesting for them in terms of learning how it works and learning how it produces errors and inaccurate content. So the way this works, this is my Behavior Insight GPT. Again, I'm trying to build toward, is there a tool I could use to train our behavior technicians? So these are the staff that work directly with kids, one-on-one for a full day, trying to teach really all skills to prepare them for kindergarten. Can we build a tool? So in this one, you basically configure your own chatbot. And here you have kind of my page of content. This is the back end screen that you can see. So before you publish your chatbot, you can test it. You can configure it yourself. So you can give it a name. Actually, it'll suggest a name for you based on what you tell it. And you can give it your instructions. So I told it that it was a GPT designed as a friendly yet professional behavior analyst, specializing in early intervention for children with autism, focusing on all of these things that I wanted. I gave it content that I asked it to avoid, and it prompts you through all these steps. It'll ask you, like, are there things you want it to avoid saying? Are there things you want it to emphasize? And then it'll generate this text for you. And what this is basically your back-end prompt. So if you think of any kind of instance where you plug a sentence or a question into the search bar, that's the front-end prompt. That's what your user interacts with. The back-end prompts are all the things you feed it that you say, this is the tone I want you to have, this is where I want you to pull information from, this is what you should avoid doing, so on and so forth. You get to pick your own conversation starters, so those show up then on this side. So for those of you that have used GPT, you know that when you go into a new GPT, it has some basic starters for questions you might ask, and you can just click those and you're off and running. In this case, you get to pick your own starters, and you can type that out so that people have content that they can plug in. And you can say, all right, how do we manage disruptive behavior with compassion? And it's thinking about that right now and how it responds. And this is a space where I can tell it if I like the answers or not. This is all like a training ground. So the more I kind of correct anything that it puts out, the more it will learn to respond the way I want it to respond when other people use it. Keep in mind, though, that the only other people that can use it are the people that are paying. So that's the downside. We'll get to a workaround in a second. And it gives us a list of how somebody might manage disruptive behavior, hopefully with compassion. Well, here we go. It talks about a strong relationship. I would have to read it to know how useful it is. I think with all of the content, you have to read and test it. It's very important. Now, where the information come from, it came from papers that I uploaded into this particular GPT when I built it. So I said, I want you to learn about this paper from Richard, 2 papers from Fox, a more recent paper from Taylor, and a paper from Callahan. So that's where it's drawing its information from. So now I'm limiting the field that it can use. So the good news is whoever uses it, it's not getting random information from the internet. It's hopefully pulling from the files. And I identify what it can use. So I've told it can use web browsing. If I want to turn that off completely, it will only use the files I've given it to respond. So you just do that by checking or unchecking the web browsing box, which is helpful. And there's several different settings you can play with. I don't know what happened there. So now it won't show behind. Oh, it's because I edited it. Now it wants me to update. And all of this is your training or testing background prior to kind of taking it live. Sorry, Zoom folks. I've got to move you. We'll ignore it for now. So that's custom GPTs. This is now accessible. The one benefit of going in and playing with it is at some point this is going to be more available to all of us for free in ways that we can use with our students, I believe. More than just assigning it to them and letting them build a chatbot and explore. But you could see a number of interesting assignments that students could work with as early as next semester if they had access to GPT-4 and could kind of get into their own chatbots. I think that would be pretty interesting and a useful approach. Questions at all so far? All right.
You're getting some shout outs in the chat
Oh,
on
great.
how useful this is, and I agree, this is fascinating.
Awesome. All right, well, here's my favorite so far. Let's jump into GPT Trainer. GPT Trainer is a independent company. They use the GPT, the OpenAI base as a way to train their models, but they're designed to let anybody train their own chatbot for use in other circumstances. I think most of it is designed around like internet website sales type mechanisms. There is a free version. The problem with the free version of this is they don't give you very many tokens. Tokens essentially let you teach it things, nor does it give you very many characters, which is what lets you ask and answer questions. I pay $10 a month for this, but it's been very useful, and I'll show you assignments we used in class with it. This is my account for it. So the first one, that's my demo bot. We'll get out of that. Let's start with what I call tact bot. So a tact is just a stupid word that Skinner used in his original publication of verbal behavior to talk about how we learn to label things in our environment. So just think of these as, this was content I was teaching 1 week in my class on verbal behavior. So I wanted to train it. I wanted to feed this the articles that I assigned to my students for that week. And then based on those articles, again, this is all working toward a chatbot for students to help them do the work. So I fed it the articles, and then I said, from these, I want you to be able to answer student questions, interact with students, prepare them for a test, all of these different pieces. And then I want a way to have a conversation with everyone together if we can do it. The goal at this point was actually to create the bot and then import it into Slack, where we could have a group conversation using Slack. And they could either ask me questions or summon the bot at any point to check, like, hey, did my professor answer this correctly? Or my professor's busy trying to win fantasy football games. Can you just answer a question while he's away? So that was the real goal or attempt here. So what happens is you have, right, Zoom, we gotta move you down. You have a place where you can add sources to your bot. Actually, let's start with settings and go through what it looks like. You can set up the visibility, and you can give it a prompt. You can pick which GPT model to use. These indicate levels of complexity of the answers, and each one requires more tokens than the one before it. So the upside is you get better answers when you go to GPT-4, but GPT-3.5 costs less money because every interaction the students have with the bot pulls from my available credits and tokens. Actually, from my tokens. No, from my credits. The tokens are the content you upload. The credits are the interactions between the bots and people. You can give it a base prompt. So I told it, I want you to, let me make this bigger, I want you to role play as an AI tutor. You'll provide answers from the sources. If the answer is not accessible, say exactly, sorry, I'm not able to answer that question, and just stop after that. Refuse to answer any question not from the source material or answered by the context. Never break character. Temperature goes 0 to 100. The closer you are to 100, the more random and weird the answers get. It starts to, like, I don't know, it gets creative, I guess. Whereas if you stay by 0, it'll be pretty short and quick and to the point. You can tell it to use in-text citations or to provide in-text citations. Users can be allowed to delete messages or not. I prefer not to let them delete messages. And that's just the setting, that's the setup. You can set up the appearance as well in terms of what you might want in there. It was pretty basic, I didn't do a whole lot with it. Then you have a spot where you can upload sources. So this was as simple as saying add sources. You can add a file, you can add a Google Drive, a website URL, sitemaps, or a Q&A. The Q&As are cool because imagine you develop a Q&A. So you've been teaching the course for 4 years, and you have 4 years worth of written questions and answers. You can upload it and train it on the questions and answers. So if you think about like FAQ type scenarios, you can just give it to the bot to handle all the FAQs, which is pretty sweet. All right, so let's get into what it provided. You can tell it's a business-oriented app because it calls the chats leads. So I give this assignment to the students to interact with the bot. I tell them that their assignment is to interact with this bot and ask for information about one of the 2 articles I gave them, and then to use the bot as a tutor. So let me pick out one of the ones I really liked from that I think would be helpful. Yep, here it is. The downside of this, let me just make sure this is the right one. Yep, this will work. I couldn't get it embedded into Slack, so students had to do it. I embedded it into the Slack as a direct message. So the problem is I couldn't see what the students wrote in Slack, and they couldn't see one another's interactions. I could interact in the Slack direct message with TactBot, but we couldn't see one another, and we couldn't have a group discussion around it. The only way to see it was through the back end of the GPT trainer. And I'm trying to find, there's one specifically that I thought the student did an exceptional job of really using it as a tutor. I'm trying to find that one. Bear with me. Here it is. All right. So their job was to ask it some questions about an article and see if it could provide those answers. And this is me, I'm now reading them. So I'm trying to test it and see how accurate is it in terms of the articles. It was very strict and rigid. It only answered from the articles. It did not pull anything from the internet, and it did not hallucinate in the process. It was very, very precise. It's very cordial. The students were able to identify which paper they wanted content from, which of the two papers that were assigned, so it could pull it from the two different ones. It could pull out information about complex content from the article. They could ask for more specific information. The cool part is when the second half of the assignment was to say, use it to study for a test from this content. So the student says, will you ask me 2 multiple choice questions about the lying in childhood section of the filing paper? And it spits out question 1, A, B, C, or D. Please let me know your answer and I'll provide you with the correct response. So she says C, deliberate falsification. Great job, your answer is correct. The current paper focuses on deliberate falsification, talks about what that refers to, and then gives her a second question. From that paper. She responds, I think D, I'm sorry, but that is not correct. It's way more pleasant than I am in terms of its interactions with students, which I felt a little bit embarrassed about, but not only does it tell them it's incorrect, it tells them why. And if she wanted to ask where in the paper that is, it can give them the direct source. And I think now, it couldn't do it at the time, now you can actually, it'll produce a link to the spot. And so they can link directly where in the paper the correct answer is. So they're able to ask many, many questions and answer many, many questions about it. But what if we get some definition matching questions? So it gives 3 definitions, or 3 questions to match a concept with a definition. And she starts to answer those. She asks about fill in the blank questions, and it produces fill in the blanks from the paper, which she then answers, and it gives feedback on all of them. She asks for true-false questions. It gives her true-false questions. And eventually she gets into short answer essay. Again, she went crazy with the bot. This is when I had to update from the free to the paid subscription. was on her use. And you can just see it's a pretty long back and forth regarding this paper and preparing for a test. So how hard is this to do is a really good question. Can we do it? How long would it take? I happen to have a demo bot available. I thought it would be interesting to try and train one live. So I emailed Christine this morning and I said, could I use one of your published papers? That way it's not from me, I haven't read, well I skimmed like the first few paragraphs of the paper. I'm as bad as GPT, I read the beginning. So I asked for permission and I thought, let's just see how long this takes and see how accurate it is. So if we upload a file, I think I have it readily available. So I'm just pulling it from my downloads. I can upload it, begin the upload. Some of these take a while to upload articles. This particular software is quick. You'll see it's uploaded pretty quickly. All right, great. The status is done. It's ready. Now we can go into settings. The prompt, we'll use GPT 3.5 because that's going to be the cheapest. I want you to role play as an AI assistant, provide answers from the given context. If the answer is not included, say sorry. This is the base prompt that they have in any bot that you create. So we'll stick with that for now. We'll do in-text citations. That works well. Oh yeah, the source is referenced. Let's definitely link to it. Anything else you think we should tell it to consider in its answers? All right.
No, let's start with that.
All right. So we'll go to. Oh, was there a question?
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Lisa.
So Mark asks, can it ask and then do a reasonable job of evaluating open-ended questions of the student?
Yes, that was in the one I just showed you. As she went through and answered, she asked it to ask her about like short answer essay questions, and it did, and she answered, and it provided. It said part of this was correct. Nice job. Here's some more information for you to think about. Here's something from the paper. So let's go to preview.
Did we ask you to only use content from?
Ooh,
Dr.
good
Bowman?
question.
Good call.
We should check.
So when you're uploading this content, there doesn't seem to be any concern about proprietary information or copyright. Is that true?
Correct. So hence the reason for the question. And if it's open source information, obviously that's not a problem. Copywritten information, yep, definite problem is, are you taking papers, are you downloading papers from a paid journal and plugging them in and then training large language models on them? Huge, huge issue. As I would say it's as big of an issue as freely distributing those papers to people who haven't paid for the subscription, which we know is a problem. So they're not new problems. It's just how the new technology interacts with the same problems that already exist.
And it's engineered essentially to address the problem by ignoring it. Is that accurate? Because do they ever say, where are you getting this information, or if you're...
It will not pull anything from a subscription service. It'll tell you. So if you tell it to use this website and give me information back, it'll say, I'm sorry, that website has paid access. I cannot pull from that website. But if I just give it any article I want to give it that I've downloaded, it will not say this article came from a private source and you can't use it.
So can you use them? I mean, what do you do about that? I mean, because we use
That's
them
a
in our
great question
classes,
for legal.
right? Because you use them in classes, right? You give students articles to read in classes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this is a little bit different because, well, if you're using a paid one, then just people who you give access have access, right?
You can make it private. Yeah. Yes. This is definitely, from an ethical question, a huge issue that pops up now, given GPT.
So I can add briefly, and I'm not a copyright expert, but in copyright there's a fair use exception which covers most of the standard academic uses and educational uses that we have come to expect. But when we get to something like this and it's open to a broader audience, that changes things.
How does it change them? What does that mean?
So I don't want to derail the
Right, I'm
presentation.
sorry.
We only
Yeah,
have about
just-
10 minutes, but basically the fair use exception talks about using articles and portions of articles for educational purposes in a recognized educational environment, so school or university or something like that. But if a chatbot is open broadly, then those sources would be used for broader benefit than just educational benefit. But the sources wouldn't directly be used, so that it becomes a problem of not direct copying, which is usually the copyright
Right.
thing, but unauthorized attribution
Right.
Right.
or something like that. So yeah, it's a
And-
good question, and we can try and dive in later
Probably
in
a
the year.
distribution question as well, because
Yeah.
in some way you're not really distributing the article, but yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah.
assume we don't have laws for all of this as part of it.
Well, I don't think so.
So if we plug it in, we want to use this this bot and see if we can learn about the article. So we can ask for a simple summary. Go ahead.
Two more suggestions. Did we give it specific goals, like this is a paper for?
You absolutely could, and that's something like as you play with it, you can use it and then go back in and retrain it. In the interest of time, I wanted to put out kind of some content that came out. So it gives a short summary.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
It's not wrong, but it's not great.
Is this fair to ask?
Yeah. Yes, that's better.
Okay.
The piece that it's still missing is that I focus also on the role of the university and the university having responsibility. Actually, maybe what you should ask is to ask it to explain the new democratic model in more detail.
While you're doing this, I actually have a question. You plug in those two articles and students could quiz it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this intended to be in lieu of the students reading the article or in addition to?
Well, ideally in addition to, right? But we assign articles all the time and have no idea what they read and don't read. We know from the test how their performance is, but even on the test, we don't know if they've read or haven't read. So the hope is they would read an article, and then perhaps there's a chat bot available that they could then interact with to get clarification, quiz themselves, ask additional questions. The hard part is on the back end, we have to go through this process that we're doing now. You have to do this and then refine your original prompt that we put in so that the students get correct information. Otherwise, they're going to get these brief answers that aren't actually correct. So it takes a little bit of iteration to get the bot to work as well as you might want it to. And the second issue that I have found is once you start uploading multiple, like many articles, more than 10, it starts to bias certain articles. Like it wants to pull from certain articles, probably the ones it caches first. And so it's not as comprehensive yet. I mean, I think the technology will get better with things, but that's why I created a single week's worth of content for the bot in one class and not the entire class. But again, the vision would be a bot that syncs into D2L and you basically upload your course content and now you have a trained assistant live in your D2L for your students to interact with and use. I think that is probably not too far away. And for me, the fun of using this is trying to figure out how we can do it now and or what things might look like in the future as the technology gets better, and to prepare the students for how they might use the technology and what they really need to avoid. Because I do think you're gonna make mistakes if you rely only on the tech. So if they didn't read the article, they'd run into problems.
So there's a question in the chat. Kinsing has a question. Is there any consensus regarding the ethics about using a chat for editing, creative writing, manuscript drafts, etc.?
None that I know of.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be similar to what we already have in place. And the different, at one point, people got information, they had to go to the library and copy an article to get the information. And then one day, all of it was accessible online versus at the library. And that sort of changed how people might use the articles, and it changed how we interpret ethical and legal requirements or guidelines for those, and I think that's probably coming with this as well.
I mean, this is kind of similar maybe to the copyright question. You deal with patients, right? There's a lot of sensitive personal information. So does the technology have any guardrails about using this information, or is this entirely at the discretion of the user?
So I would not put any identifiable information into the models yet.
Right, you would,
at all.
but would the model allow you to do so?
U of M right now is working with the health, IT is working with the health system to develop an internal AI assistant that will use patient data and will have HIPAA guidelines and guardrails on it. But it's proprietary, they built it themselves, so it's not like accessible to others. But at some point, I think it will be, we will have HIPAA guidelines. I mean, again, similar to at one point, our doctors kept all our files in locked file cabinets on site, and then eventually we had, you know, electronic medical records. I think we'll see the same thing eventually in terms of an AI, what you can put into an AI and what you can't, but the tech doesn't exist for it yet.
We have another question from online, from Hin Singh. In Bridging with D2L, can you use the answers or your conversation between students and instructors to further train or evolve the custom chatbot?
Probably, but right now, none of it's linked. So all of that would be manualized. So, or manual additions. So in this one, for example, if I want to go to sources, if I want to add a source, I can take those Q&As I can download them into a document. I can then upload that document, or I can just pull the questions and answers and plug them in right here. So here's the question, and here's essentially a pre-canned answer. And if you set the randomness scale higher, it'll veer from the pre-canned answer to improvise, for better or worse.
We have just a couple of minutes and then we should wrap up. All right. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. The idea of this series is to help us create a community of practice across the college, and I think that is something we have done tremendously well today. So thank you, Josh, for sharing this and being willing to share your experience and help us think through all of these things. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. It's fun to present. And feel free to email me if you have additional questions. I see the Zoom chat grew.